With Christmas just around the corner, I figured now would be a great time to dive into some of the coldest fights in Bleach. Pun intended, as we rank Toshiro Hitsugaya's battles throughout the series. The captain of Squad 10 has absolutely loads of fights in the source material, but I'll be honest, as I was compiling this list, it occurred to me that while Hitsugaya has a lot of battles to his name, I'm not sure many of them are really all that great. If we compare Hitsugaya's list to the first captain, whose fights we ranked not too long ago now, Kenpachi, Hitsugaya simply doesn't have the same immense highs in his catalogue, from Kenpachi's numerous one-shots to obliterating a meteor, and maybe that's to be expected when comparing these two in particular. However, I wanted to do something that was remotely festive as the year comes to an end, and so we're putting the focus squarely on the Frosty captain this time round, and ranking every fight he has in the source material from worst to best. When ranking them, I took a variety of criteria into consideration. How effective they are as fights in Bleach, how much fun I think they are, how spectacular and interesting they are, and simply how much I like them, but also what they do for Hitsugaya's character as well. There's an even 10 to look at here, spanning every arc of Bleach, so let's dive in. Of course, this list is purely my subjective opinion, so let me know your own personal rankings down in the comments. And yes, before we get started on the list, there will be spoilers for the 1000-Year Blood War arc of Bleach in the video to come. Okay, like we did with the Kenpachi video, it only makes sense to kick things off by looking at any one-shots that Hitsugaya's been involved in, except, unlike Kenpachi, this time there's only one, and here Hitsugaya is on the receiving end of it. Hitsugaya vs Aizen in the Soul Society arc is a brutal put-down of the little captain, with Aizen taunting Hitsugaya as the captain discovers both Aizen's treachery and Momo's nearly lifeless body. Enraged, Hitsugaya activates bankai for the very first time in the series, giving us a great look at Daiguren Hyorinmaru in all of its icy glory. However, Aizen merely smirks at the captain, calling him weak before cutting him down in a single stroke, blood erupting from Hitsugaya's body as his wings explode like shards of glass around him. This fight, bad though it may be for Hitsugaya, did serve a purpose. Ultimately, it was our first glimpse into how unbelievably powerful Aizen really was, and an eye-opening look at the true disparity between certain captains. Alright, and with that out of the way, we move on to the proper fights, so to speak. And I'd argue number 9, Hitsugaya vs Lupi, is a fairly major fight in the Arankar arc, at least the early stages. But the problem is, Hitsugaya is barely involved. When Aizen sends another squad of Arankar to Karakura town, Hitsugaya's advance force engages them. Initially, Hitsugaya isn't facing Lupi at all, but he's squaring off against Yami. However, Lupi, the new 6th Espada at the time, very quickly takes control of the fight, deciding to release his Zanpakuto and battle Hitsugaya's entire team at once. Immediately, there is one thing that I really do like about this fight, and that's Hitsugaya attempting to stop Lupi from releasing his Zanpakuto. Finally, a character doesn't just sit there and let the enemy transform. It's a nice, genre-savvy moment for the captain, even if it doesn't quite work in the end. Lupi's Resurrection Trepadora is revealed, and thanks to his 8 tentacles, he instantly surrounds and blasts Hitsugaya out of the sky, the captain dropping to the ground far below. Wait, is that it? For the most part, yeah, that's Hitsugaya versus Lupi, at least until the very end. Not bothering to follow up on Hitsugaya, Lupi turns his attention back to the other Shinigami and begins dominating the fight. That is until several of his tentacles suddenly freeze. Having been left alone and unchecked for long enough, Hitsugaya returns, having built up enough power to activate the ability Senen Hyoro, encasing Lupi inside an enormous cage of ice, sealing the bars shut around the Espada with a click. Lupi survives being entombed, but the fight is over. Senen Hyoro is a really cool way to end this battle. It's totally unique. We never see this power again in the source material, and that makes it memorable in my mind at least. Now, this battle coming in at number 8 is an interesting one, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad fight at all, it's just not quite up to the standard of the rest, and that's Hitsugaya versus Yukio in the Lost Agent arc. If there's one thing to be said for the battles at the end of this arc, it's that they are unique. Certainly Hitsugaya doesn't have another fight like it. After the Fullbringer, Yukio separates all the fighters into different chat rooms to do battle. Hitsugaya goes up against Yukio himself. With Yukio in complete control of the battle arena, he taunts Hitsugaya, watching as the captain tries to locate him in a digital maze while avoiding missiles. So already this fight has a very unique aesthetic to it, and when Hitsugaya finally arrives at the central control room, the two clash, with Yukio summoning countless eldritch monsters to take on the captain. The monster designs themselves are cool and creative, they aren't hollows, they don't look really anything like hollows, they are totally new for Bleach, and Yukio's Fullbring abilities are a lot more interesting now that they can expand beyond the screen of his console. Watching him delete and rebuild the walls around them is pretty neat, and given more time and experience, Yukio could become very formidable. However, as it stands, he's currently no match for the captain, and Hitsugaya defeats him quickly and easily, freezing the floor and then simply shoving Yukio onto the icy path once he's got him riled up and distracted. With Yukio's controls frozen, he loses access to his Fullbring, and Hitsugaya then saves him from the rampaging monsters he created before taking the execution member hostage. I think the transition into learning a little more about Yukio is quite abrupt, and Hitsugaya makes the correct connection to Yukio's past virtually out of nowhere. But aside from that, the fight is short and sweet, and I actually really appreciate that Hitsugaya secures victory through careful planning and some strategy for once, rather than just brute force. Having found himself embroiled at the centre of the conspiracy now gripping the Gotei 13, Hitsugaya comes face to face with Hinamori in the dead of night, his childhood friend accusing him of the murder of her beloved Captain Aizen. Hitsugaya suspects the truth, however. Gin Ichimaru is behind this, and Hitsugaya plans on killing him this night. Hitsugaya vs Gin is another brisk battle, but it's an epic one, and I remember finding it very exciting back in the day. Now admittedly, I personally was more excited to see Gin in action than Hitsugaya, but both of them come out of this duel looking pretty awesome. It's atmospheric and emotional, with Hitsugaya having to first put down a delusional Hinamori before he can face his true target. It's a heart-rending setup for a battle between these two prodigies. Meanwhile, Gin approaches the entire thing like a game, at least until the little captain gets serious, unleashing his power and revealing his Shikai Hyorinmaru for the very first time, lighting up the night sky with a crystalline blue dragon of ice. There's a great, palpable sense of power in this fight. The power of two captains coming together like a force of nature as Izuru watches in awe at Hitsugaya's strength before being unwittingly caught up in the tempest. Gin mostly spends the fight on the back foot, that is at least until Hitsugaya outmaneuvers him, freezing his arm and going for the kill. In what remains one of Gin's coolest moments ever, he opens his eyes at last and fires Shinso at point-blank range, Hitsugaya narrowly avoiding the blade, only for it to rush, screaming towards Hinamori. Thankfully, the arrival of Matsumoto not only saves Hinamori, but signals the end of the fight. Like I said, it's over in a flash, but it's a great, tense battle for both characters involved. Now, I feel like I've talked about this fight a lot lately, but coming in at number 6, we've got Toshiro plus the Gotei 13 plus the Vizards versus Aizen. Now, as you probably know, I like this fight quite a bit, from Aizen's perspective. From the view of the captains, well, they all kind of end up looking like chumps, but of course that's by design. Hitsugaya takes the lead on this battle, clashing with Aizen early and attempting to take control of the showdown. Now, while Hitsugaya has a pretty bad time of it in this fight, I think regardless it does wonders for his character overall. At last, he's able to confront Aizen, the nexus of his hate, and release his anger, even call into question his suitability as a captain. This fight is Hitsugaya's breaking point. His immaturity as a captain is put on blast here, and he, along with his comrades, suffer the consequences of his anger. Consequences that change him and cause him to grow and mature into a better protector, someone more worthy to carry the banner of captain. Of course, Aizen soundly defeats him here, along with everyone else, tricking Hitsugaya into stabbing Hinamori, the object of his so-called protection. Having lost everything, Hitsugaya's crazed rage brings about his own defeat, as he's brutally cut down by Aizen and left to watch the rest of the war unfold before him, only able to ponder his mistakes on the ground. Okay, as we reach the top 5 now, up next we have Hitsugaya's final battle of the series. Hitsugaya, Byakuya, and Zaraki versus Gerard Valkyrie. Having been de-zombified thanks to Mayuri, a rejuvenated Hitsugaya joins in the enormous showdown in Varvelt, rescuing the fallen Gotei 13 and Vizard soldiers from Sternritter M, the Miracle Gerard, who has grown to a titanic size at this point. Although Hitsugaya is no match really for the enormous Quincy, even in Bankai, he and Byakuya attempt to come up with a strategy to bring Gerard down, while Zaraki faces the Sternritter directly. This is an interesting fight from Hitsugaya's perspective, I think. It's made very clear from early on that he's unable to really do anything to Gerard at the moment, the Quincy either shrugging off his attacks or flat out denying the little captain the right to battle once he's decided that Zaraki will be his only opponent. That being said, I like how aware Hitsugaya is here, and Kubo makes good use of the battle's unusual setting to add some extra unexpected tension. With Varvelt floating high above the Seirete, anything massive that falls could be catastrophic, and Hitsugaya spends time attempting to ensure that doesn't happen. Whether he's blocking Zaraki's own blade, warning the captain that cutting Gerard down could result in the Seirete's complete destruction far below, or catching entire cityscapes in midair with his ice. Of course, the biggest moment for Hitsugaya comes at the end. With his ice petals gone, his completed bankai is revealed in a big twist, delivering fans one final transformation for the icy Shinigami. Now extraordinarily powerful and an adult, Hitsugaya dukes it out with Gerard on a more even playing field, eventually freezing the Colossus to his core and, working with Byakuya, obliterating him completely. Now, the nature of this fight, the nature of Gerard himself as an opponent, means it can never really rank much higher than this. It's an ultimately flawed battle. But for Hitsugaya specifically, I'd say it's a fairly good one. And now for something a little different. With Hitsugaya now a zombie and under the control of Sternritter Z Giselle, he's been unshackled. No longer bound by morals or a sense of purity and good, Hitsugaya is set free, and we see what's essentially his true power and skill unleashed for the very first time. Honestly, that makes this whole battle feel very unique for the captain. He's simply not himself, but that means a fresh take on someone who has had many fights in the past. Watching him completely dismantle Ikkaku and Yumichika in the most ruthless and merciless fashion possible is awesome. Perhaps the kindest captain in the Gotei 13 has been turned into a remorseless killing machine. This sequence shows exactly why Hitsugaya is a captain in the first place. From his torrential ice that's enough to render Ikkaku totally immobile with a single, almost effortless swing, to his impeccable Zanjutsu skill. Plus, it's always cool seeing the myriad inventive ways Hitsugaya can use his ice, and there's a grim effectiveness to the way he applies it in his brutally short takedown of Yumichika. When he then goes on to fight Mayuri in the matchup you never expected and never knew you wanted, Hitsugaya's power is unparalleled, with his bankai capable of killing the scientist in a matter of seconds, were it only that easy. We may have only seen Hitsugaya like this once, but that makes it all the more special in my mind. It was a peek behind the curtain at what the captain was really capable of, were he to forego his good-hearted nature, and to be honest, it was kind of scary. Coming in at number 3, we have arguably Hitsugaya's most famous fight, his battle against the third Espada, Tia Haribel. Now, this might be a controversial placement, but I've outlined before, most recently in my last upload, why I don't think this fight totally works, but that's mostly coming from Harabel's perspective. Yes, I'm not a huge fan of Hitsugaya's endless bag of tricks in this fight, especially his infamous ice clone ability. But regardless, he does prove himself a truly capable fighter here. The visuals are also excellent. We really don't have a lot of water users in Bleach, so to see Harabel slinging enormous, crashing tidal waves felt very novel, and it was cool how both characters seemed to counter one another almost perfectly, the total opposite of Soifon versus Baragon. Hitsugaya had an answer for Harabel's water by freezing it, bringing it under his command, but Harabel could simply melt the ice, turning it back into water, and so on and so forth. On the flip side though, that does mean that this fight can feel meandering, and doesn't really go anywhere until it suddenly does. Both sides are fairly equal, and both combatants take the time to lecture the other on the laws of battle while waiting for the battlefield itself to fill with moisture, enabling them to deliver their ultimate attack. Hitsugaya, however, suddenly decides that he doesn't need to wait, and instead takes control of the very weather itself, using Tenso Jurin before activating his show-stopping ability Hyoten Hyakoso. As a gaping hole opens in the dark clouds above, a glittering pure white stream of slush pours down upon Harabel, and the moment any of the ice touches her body, it blooms into a beautiful crystal flower, covering her entire self in ice until a towering tree of flowers stands tall on the battlefield, the blooming of which supposedly signalling the end of the Espada's life. Now there's no denying it. Hyoten Hyakoso is one of the most beautiful and stunning abilities in Bleach. It really does, I think, look genuinely artistic, and it is so incredible to behold. It does also, as with a lot of Hitsugaya's abilities, kind of come out of nowhere, and you just have to accept that this is now also something else he can do. Harabel survives the attack, however, and later both Hiyori and Lisa join in the fight, but honestly, it's mostly out of steam by this point, ending abruptly once Aizen decides he's had enough. Okay, so as we arrive at the top two Toshiro Hitsugaya fights in Bleach, this one might be a little surprising, but hear me out. As one of the earliest battles in the Rankar arc, Hitsugaya vs Xiaolong feels different to a lot of what comes after it. Here, even though they're only Fraction, the enemies feel truly dangerous, and Hitsugaya seems like he's being pushed to his limit, even in bankai. Speaking of which, this is the first time we get to see Hitsugaya actually fighting with his bankai in the series, after his unceremonious defeat at the hands of Aizen in the arc before, and it's a really cool display. I especially love Hitsugaya zipping past Xiaolong only to try and strike him with a sneak attack from behind by whipping his dragon tail at the Rankar. That's not something he ever does again, and it's a cool application of Daigoren Hyorinmaru itself. It helps too that Xiaolong is a seriously underrated villain. His design is wicked, and that's doubly true for his resurrection, where his fingers essentially become gigantic knives. Just take a look at the sheer cold-blooded viciousness on display here, as Hitsugaya is carved up, streams of blood bursting out of him. And by the way, is it just me, or did Kubo seriously begin to tone down the blood effects, in particular from about the Fate Karakura Town arc onwards? This is an awesome panel, and I love this cliffhanger, with the extremely smug Xiaolong thinking he's won, only for the Gotei to finally get the call they've been waiting for all along. Yes, despite the fairly high stakes feeling here, the enemies are still only Fraction, and it's revealed in a very cathartic climax that the Shinigami have only been using a fifth of their true power, thanks to Gentei Kaijo, a seal placed on them so they don't adversely affect the human world. And together, they lift the limit, with Hitsugaya instantly turning the tables on Xiaolong, killing him with a violent, icy stab to the throat. Honestly, as far as twist endings in Bleach fights go, this one makes a lot of sense, and I really like it. Plus, this is one of the few villains Hitsugaya actually kills, which is really cool too. Frankly, this is just a super underrated fight, and I think it's honestly really good. However, as we arrive at our number 1 spot, I wasn't sure whether I should place both of these battles together or not, but I decided to in the end, as I think they really come together to make one whole fight. They are better together, they exist better as one single battle. One story of complete, crushing defeat turned into triumphant redemption. Of course, my top spot pick then goes to Hitsugaya versus Bazz-B and Kang-Do. In my opinion, this fight has it all for Hitsugaya. It shows him at his absolute lowest point after having his bankai stolen, yet he's still determined, still strong and motivated to win and protect. We see the fruits of that determination in the newfound creative ways he can fight with his Shikai, but of course, it's not enough. It was never going to be enough. This fight is a wild ride, swinging like a terrible pendulum from one side to the next. Hitsugaya and Matsumoto work together in a nice bit of captain and vice-captain teamwork to hold Bazz-B back, but it's simply not enough. This is Hitsugaya's moment of reckoning. All the most popular captains got one in the 1000-Year Blood War arc, and Bazz-B steamrolls him, completely taking the captain apart with his flaming powers, pushing Hitsugaya to the brink until we see him utterly defeated. It's a surprisingly heart-rending moment as Matsumoto's corpse is dumped in front of Hitsugaya's broken body, the little captain's eyes just wide in disbelief and horror. But the pendulum swings again, and as Kang-Do takes over the fight, gloating while he wears the ill-gotten Daigurin Hyorin-Maru on his back, Hitsugaya rises again, his bankai returning to him. I've started to appreciate this sequence a lot more as I've grown older. I still think Kang-Do deserved a longer fight, but considering the nature of this duel, considering how spiteful it all feels and how much of a grudge match it is between the two sides, there's something very satisfying about Hitsugaya turning the tables at last and avenging Matsumoto. With his bankai returning to him, Hitsugaya battles Kang, the sternritter attempting to pummel Hitsugaya with hand-to-hand combat, but eventually the captain's full power returns to him. Now with the addition of holification, by the way, another neat twist to add to the roller coaster that is this fight. And he defeats Kang, imprisoning him in a cross of ice. Like I said, I think this fight has everything, which is why it tops the list for me, even a cameo from Hyorin-Maru himself. And in my opinion, it is Toshiro Hitsugaya's greatest fight in Bleach. But that's the video, that's my rankings of Hitsugaya, the Icy Captain's fights in Bleach. Like I said before, this is of course just my opinion, so please do let me know your lists in the comments below. I'd love to see how similar they are. And so guys, that's going to do it from me now before Christmas. I want to say, as always, a massive thank you for continuing to support me. It really does mean the world to me. And if you celebrate it, I hope you all have a safe and wonderful Christmas. If you get anything awesome Bleach related, do make sure to let me know down in the comments. And as always, I want to end by saying a massive thank you to my Patreon supporters. I really do appreciate each and every one of you so very much. It does mean the absolute world to me. If you like what I do here over on YouTube, you too can support me over on Patreon to get your name in the credits just like this, and to get every single video of mine completely ad-free. Alright guys, but that's it from me. Once again, Merry Christmas. I hope you have an absolutely amazing time. Thanks again for all the support. And until next time, I'll catch you later. And I'll see you then.